I still remember the day vividly, the day everything changed. It started like any other day in the Smoky Mountains, the sun barely peeking through the dense canopy of trees. I had been a forest ranger for a decade, and the mountains felt like home. I loved the solitude, the quiet whispers of nature, but there was a darkness lurking beneath the surface that I hadn't yet understood. It was late September, the leaves turning vibrant shades of red and orange. I was tasked with checking on a remote trail that hadn't been used in years. The ranger station buzzed with excitement and anticipation as rumors spread about strange occurrences reported by visitors. But I brushed them off. I had seen my fair share of wildlife and natural phenomena. I was not one to be easily spooked. As I ventured deeper into the woods, an unsettling feeling crept over me. The air grew colder, and the forest grew eerily quiet. I shrugged it off as just my imagination running wild, but the feeling lingered, growing stronger with each step I took. The trail twisted and turned, leading me to a clearing where the sunlight poured in like a spotlight. That's when I saw it. At first, it looked like an old stone altar covered in moss and vines. But as I approached, I realized it was something much more sinister. Symbols etched into the stone, dark and twisted, sent chills down my spine. I could almost hear a low hum emanating from the altar, vibrating through the ground beneath my feet. I pulled out my phone, ready to document this strange find, but the screen flickered and died. The forest swallowed the sound of my voice as I called out for help, but only silence responded. A sense of dread settled in my stomach, and every instinct screamed at me to leave. Just as I turned to retrace my steps, I noticed movement in the shadows. A figure emerged from the trees, cloaked in darkness. My heart raced as the figure stepped into the light, revealing a gaunt face with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through me. It was a man, or what used to be one. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and he appeared to be in a state of decay. "Help me," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "You have to get out of here." "Who are you?" I stammered, backing away. "What happened to you?" But before he could answer, a horrific scream echoed through the trees, piercing the silence like a knife. It was a sound unlike anything I had ever heard, primal and filled with pain. The man's expression shifted from pleading to one of terror, and he gestured frantically for me to flee. I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted back down the trail, branches scratching at my arms and legs, as the screams intensified behind me. My breath came in ragged gasps as I pushed through the underbrush, desperate to escape whatever horrors lay within the forest. I stumbled upon a group of hikers, their faces pale with fear. "What's going on?" I yelled, trying to catch my breath. They looked at me as if I were a ghost. "Did you see him?" one of the women gasped, her eyes wide. "We saw a man. He was not right." I could hardly comprehend what was happening. "We need to leave now," I shouted, glancing back toward the trail. The screams faded, but the sense of dread never left. We made our way back to the ranger station, each step feeling like a countdown to something terrible. Upon arriving, I reported the incident, but the rangers were skeptical. They had heard whispers of a lost soul in the mountains, a figure seen by those who wandered too deep. They brushed it off as folklore, a story to scare the inexperienced. But I knew what I had seen. The days that followed were filled with unease. Visitors reported seeing shadows flitting between the trees and hearing whispers that sent shivers down their spines. I became obsessed with the altar and the man I encountered. I researched local legends, uncovering tales of a cult that once thrived in these mountains, performing rituals to appease dark forces. One evening, unable to shake my curiosity, I returned to the clearing, determined to uncover the truth. The air was thick with tension, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. As I approached the altar, a cold wind swept through the trees, extinguishing the last traces of sunlight. I felt a presence behind me, a weight pressing against my back. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. There he was again, the man with hollow eyes. But this time he was closer, and the stench of decay filled the air. "You shouldn't have come back," he rasped, his voice like gravel. "You can't escape what you disturbed." Panic surged within me, and I stumbled backward, my feet tangling in the roots of a tree. I could feel the ground beneath me shift, as if the forest itself was alive, angry at my intrusion. "What do you want?" I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. "The forest demands a sacrifice," he hissed, his form flickering like a candle in the wind. "And you have awakened it." Suddenly, the ground shook, and shadows poured from the trees, swirling around me like smoke. I was trapped in a nightmare, unable to escape the darkness that had claimed so many before me. As the shadows enveloped me, I realized the truth. The Smoky Mountains were alive, and they held secrets that should never have been uncovered. I understood then that I had become part of the forest story, a warning to all who dared to venture too deep. Now, as I stand here, recounting this tale, I urge you, never go to the Smoky Mountains National Park. There are things in those woods that should remain undisturbed, lurking just beyond the trees, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to awaken their wrath. In the early light of dawn, the Smoky Mountains appeared ethereal, draped in a thick veil of mist that rolled over the peaks like a shroud. It was here that I, Jimmy, found my solace as a forest ranger. After 10 years patrolling these ancient woods, I thought I knew every inch of the terrain, from the winding trails to the hidden clearings. My job, while often solitary, allowed me to connect deeply with nature. It was a world brimming with life, majestic trees, vibrant flora, and an array of wildlife that thrived in the untouched corners of the park. However, beneath this serene surface, a more sinister reality lay waiting to be discovered. I had always considered myself an ordinary ranger, committed to preserving the beauty of the Smokies. My colleagues, however, saw me differently. They respected my knowledge, but often exchanged glances when I walked by, a hint of skepticism lingering in their expressions. It wasn't that I lacked skill. Rather, I was an outsider among them, a newcomer to their tight-knit community. Many of them had grown up in these mountains, learning the forest secrets from childhood. I felt like an interloper, despite my best efforts to integrate into their world. Among my colleagues was Greg, a seasoned ranger with a wealth of experience. He was the type of man who could track a deer by its footprints and knew the names of every bird that sang in the trees. Greg was my closest ally and often mentored me on the nuances of the job, but even he seemed to regard me with a mix of wariness and bemusement. I often caught him looking at me sideways, as if he were trying to decipher a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Then there was Sheila, a passionate and spirited ranger with an infectious love for the forest. Her laughter echoed through the trails, and she had a way of making even the dullest days feel like an adventure. Sheila's optimism often clashed with the darker tales that circulated among the rangers, the legends of lost souls and ancient rituals that haunted these mountains. While I enjoyed our banter, I could sense the tension when she joked about the stories. There was an unspoken agreement among the rangers to keep those tales at bay, to not let them seep into our daily lives. One chilly October morning, I found myself alone at the ranger station, the quietude of the early hour broken only by the sound of leaves rustling outside. I had just brewed a cup of coffee when Greg sauntered in, his face unusually grave. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms, and regarded me with a seriousness that piqued my curiosity. "Have you heard about the latest visitor?" he asked, his voice low. I shook my head, intrigued. "What happened?" "Some hikers came back spooked. They claimed they saw something in the woods, some kind of figure. They said it was not human," he said, his tone heavy with caution. I felt a shiver run down my spine. "What do you mean, not human?" Greg sighed, looking out the window at the swirling fog. They didn't want to talk about it much, but the way they described it, hollow eyes, skin like wax, a voice that echoed as if it were coming from far away. "It sounds like one of those stories." I rolled my eyes, dismissing it as typical park folklore. You know how people are. They get spooked and blow things out of proportion. Greg nodded, but I could see the worry etched on his face. Just be careful out there, okay? There's a reason we have those tales. They're rooted in something. As I prepared to head out on my patrol, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me. The sun rose higher in the sky, illuminating the vibrant foliage, yet the beauty around me felt tainted, overshadowed by an impending sense of dread. The trail I was assigned to check hadn't seen traffic in years, a forgotten path buried beneath underbrush and moss. It felt like stepping into a time capsule, where the world outside ceased to exist. I knew that exploring these hidden places often came with risks, but I also believed it was my duty to maintain the trails for future visitors. As I walked, I felt the atmosphere shift, the air thickening with anticipation. The forest seemed alive, pulsating with secrets just beneath the surface. I noticed the way the sunlight flickered through the leaves, casting eerie shadows that danced along the ground. I pushed the feeling aside, attributing it to my overactive imagination, a symptom of being alone in the wilderness for too long. When I reached the clearing, my breath caught in my throat. The stone altar emerged from the earth, a grotesque monument adorned with cryptic symbols. It was an unsettling sight that filled me with an inexplicable sense of foreboding. I couldn't shake the notion that it had been waiting for me, like a predator lying in wait for its prey. As I studied the altar, a strange sensation washed over me. The forest grew unnaturally quiet, as if every creature had suddenly ceased to exist. That was when I heard it, a whispering sound that floated through the trees, barely audible yet unmistakably there. It felt as if the forest was speaking, urging me to turn back, to forget what I had stumbled upon. But curiosity gnawed at me, and I took a step closer to the altar. I reached out to touch the weathered stone, a mix of awe and terror coursing through me. The moment my fingers brushed the surface, the ground trembled beneath me, sending a jolt of panic through my body. I knew then that I had crossed a threshold, a line that should never have been crossed. As I pulled away, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. Something lurked in the shadows, something that should not exist. My heart raced as I turned to face it, knowing in that instant that the tales were no longer just stories. They were warnings, and I had become part of a dark history that would forever haunt the Smoky Mountains. As I stood there, the lingering echo of the whisper faded into the stillness of the woods, but my heart raced like a wild animal. I instinctively glanced around, half expecting to see whatever had caused that sensation lurking in the shadows. Nothing moved, just the oppressive silence of the forest. The moment felt charged, like the calm before a storm. I wanted to dismiss it as paranoia, a trick of the mind fueled by the unsettling atmosphere, but the unease clung to me like a shroud. Days passed, and I couldn't shake the encounter at the altar from my mind. Each patrol brought me back to that moment, that feeling of having brushed against something ancient and powerful. I found myself obsessing over the stories Greg and the other rangers had told me, tales of missing hikers, strange rituals, and things that roamed the night, searching for the living. I became hyper-aware of every rustle in the bushes, every flicker of shadow in my periphery. That weekend, I was scheduled for an overnight shift, a routine part of my job. I should have felt comfortable, familiar with the trails and the forest rhythms, but the idea of spending the night alone in the woods, especially after my recent experience, filled me with dread. As dusk settled and the sun dipped below the horizon, the trees transformed into looming specters, casting long shadows that seemed to dance and shift. I set up my camp in a small clearing, determined to focus on my duties and keep the tales of the Smoky Mountains at bay. I lit a fire, the flickering light offering a small comfort against the encroaching darkness. As the night deepened, the forest came alive with sounds, the rustling of leaves, distant howls, and the occasional hoot of an owl. It was the kind of night that inspired both wonder and fear. Around midnight, I heard it again, a whisper. This time, it was clearer, more urgent. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to hear, convinced I was imagining things. I sat frozen by the fire, the warmth of the flames battling against the chill creeping into my bones. The whisper floated on the night air, sounding almost like my name. Jimmy, Jimmy. It felt both familiar and foreign, and I found myself standing up, drawn to the sound as if it were a thread tugging at my consciousness. Compelled by a mixture of fear and curiosity, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped away from the fire. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the trees ahead. With each step, the whispers grew louder, swirling around me, echoing my thoughts and fears. They led me deeper into the woods, further away from the safety of my camp. I had no idea where I was heading, but something inside me urged me forward, as if the forest itself was beckoning me. I pushed through the underbrush, my mind racing with every possible explanation for what I was experiencing. Perhaps it was an echo from my subconscious, a manifestation of my anxiety. But as I reached the clearing where the altar stood, I felt a shiver of recognition wash over me. The symbols carved into the stone glowed faintly under the moonlight, a spectral invitation that filled me with both dread and wonder. But the whispers had changed. Now, they were not calling my name, but weaving a story, a history that filled the air around me. I heard fragments of sentences, warnings about trespassers, tales of sacrifices made to appease the spirits of the mountain. It was a narrative of pain, loss, and desperation, and it gripped my heart with an icy hand. I realized these were not the benign myths I had dismissed. They were warnings etched in blood and bone. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The wind picked up, swirling around me, carrying the whispers to a crescendo. I felt a rush of air pass through me, a ghostly chill that spoke of forgotten lives and lost souls. Panic surged within me, a primal instinct screaming that I needed to flee. But before I could turn back, a figure emerged from the shadows, a silhouette formed from darkness itself. My heart dropped as it stepped into the moonlight. The figure was tall, unnaturally thin, with limbs that seemed to stretch beyond the limits of human anatomy. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, reflecting the moonlight in a grotesque way. I could see deep-set eyes, voids that held nothing but darkness. It didn't speak but pointed at me with a skeletal finger, and I felt my breath hitch in my throat. Every story I had ever heard flooded back, and in that moment, I understood that I was not just an observer of the woods. I was part of something far more sinister. Instinct took over, and I turned to run, the whispers transforming into a cacophony of screams echoing through the trees. I barreled through the underbrush, branches clawing at my skin as I raced back toward the safety of the camp. My heart thundered in my ears, drowning out the sounds of the forest. The figure's presence loomed behind me, its energy palpable as it chased me, feeding off my fear. When I reached my camp, I collapsed beside the dying embers of the fire, gasping for breath. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to get as far away from this place as possible. But the forest held me captive, the whispers now circling like vultures, taunting me for daring to believe I could escape. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me, the malevolent presence drawing nearer. I knew that I was no longer just a ranger. I was a target, an unwitting participant in a game far older than I could comprehend. The Smoky Mountains, once a sanctuary, had morphed into a labyrinth of terror, and I was ensnared in its web. As I sat there, trembling next to the dying fire, the weight of the previous hours began to settle in. The terror I had felt in the woods was more than just my imagination. It was a revelation that I could no longer deny. But while my immediate focus was on the supernatural events surrounding me, there were deeper layers to unravel, layers that connected me to this haunting legacy. The other rangers had their own stories and demons. Greg, the seasoned ranger I had once looked up to, had his share of troubles. He was a man marked by grief, having lost his brother in the mountains under mysterious circumstances. For years, he had been searching for answers, drawn to the forest with a mix of love and resentment. It was Greg who had first shared the legends of the Smoky Mountains, tales of ancient spirits and dark rituals performed by those who once inhabited the land. His obsession was clear to anyone who had witnessed his relentless search for the truth. He often wandered off the beaten path, exploring the forgotten trails that led to the deeper heart of the forest. Then there was Rachel, the new recruit. She was fresh out of training, full of idealism and a naive enthusiasm that often annoyed me. Yet, beneath her cheerful demeanor, I sensed an underlying anxiety. She had lost her father to the woods when she was a child, an incident shrouded in uncertainty and dark whispers. Every time she ventured out, I could see the tension in her posture, a mix of fear and determination to find closure. While she appeared to have accepted the forest as a natural part of her job, it was clear that its secrets weighed heavily on her. Rachel often sought me out, eager to learn the ropes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was drawn to the stories of loss and tragedy, hoping to piece together the fragments of her father's disappearance. I found myself both wanting to help her and fearing the consequences of digging too deep into the past. The forest was a beautiful but treacherous place, and I worried that my own inadequacies as a ranger would put her in danger. Yet, I couldn't turn away. Her enthusiasm was infectious. In the days following my chilling encounter, I noticed Rachel spending more time on her own. She would ask about the forest's darker legends, seeking validation for the fears she held. I felt responsible for her curiosity, especially after what had happened to me. It was as if the woods were drawing her in, weaving a spell that was impossible to resist. I tried to warn her, to share my fears, but she brushed them off, believing that knowledge was power and that she could face whatever lay hidden in the shadows. Simultaneously, I noticed Greg's demeanor shifting. The spark of obsession in his eyes had intensified. He had started to piece together the old legends, convinced that they held the key to understanding his brother's disappearance. I could see that his pursuit was becoming more reckless, pushing boundaries I had hesitated to cross. He was often gone for days at a time, lost in the depths of the forest, searching for something that I feared he might never find. One night, when I couldn't sleep, I decided to confront Greg about his obsession. I found him sitting by the fire in the ranger station, surrounded by maps and old books filled with notes scribbled in the margins. He looked up at me with a wild intensity, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. "You have to understand, Jimmy. The forest speaks to me. I'm on the verge of discovering something monumental," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, laden with a mix of excitement and desperation. "What if it's not a secret you want to uncover, Greg? What if it's something meant to stay buried?" I replied, my voice trembling with fear. The idea that he might be drawing closer to the truth was both terrifying and alluring. His eyes narrowed, a mixture of anger and hurt flashing across his face. "You're afraid of the dark because you haven't dared to face it, but it's the only way to find closure. We're all connected to this place, whether we like it or not. You know it as much as I do." It was true. I could feel the connection we all shared with the Smoky Mountains, a bond forged in loss and longing. But there was something more sinister lurking beneath that connection. Days later, Rachel came to me, panic in her eyes. "I saw something, Jimmy. I was on the North Trail, and I felt this presence like I wasn't alone. I swear I heard my dad calling out to me," she said, her voice shaking. I looked into her eyes, a fear welling up inside me. "You have to be careful, Rachel. The woods can play tricks on you. It's easy to get lost in the past out there." But deep down, I knew that she was already entwined in a web of memories and pain. Her journey was becoming intertwined with Greg's and mine, and I feared that our paths would converge in ways none of us could foresee. As I continued to patrol the forest, I felt the weight of the unspoken truths around me, the tales of the missing. The spirits of the mountains and the secrets buried in the earth were rising to the surface, and I couldn't help but think that the forest was pushing us toward a reckoning. Each encounter with Rachel and Greg chipped away at my resolve, drawing me deeper into a conflict that felt like it was about to spiral out of control. I realized then that our stories, those of grief, obsession, and the search for closure, were tangled together. The forest was not merely a backdrop for our individual struggles. It was an active participant in our lives, entwining our fates in ways that were both beautiful and horrifying. At that moment, I understood that I couldn't turn my back on Rachel or Greg. If they were going to face the darkness that the Smoky Mountains concealed, I would have to stand with them, even if it meant confronting my own fears. It was an ordinary day at the ranger station, though the tension in the air was palpable. I could feel it clinging to my skin like a second layer, suffocating in its intensity. Rachel and Greg had been acting strangely, and the woods seemed to echo their unrest. Every rustle of leaves or snap of twigs felt like a portent of something ominous. As I suited up for another patrol, a storm brewed in the distance, dark clouds rolling over the mountains, and I had an unsettling feeling that today would be different. I headed out alone, the weight of my gear heavy on my back. The trails were eerily quiet, the usual chorus of birds silenced by the impending storm. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I recalled my earlier encounters with Rachel and Greg, their respective burdens weighing heavily on my mind. I hadn't been able to help either of them, and now I was left to confront my own growing fears alone. Halfway through my patrol, I heard a commotion up ahead. My heart raced as I picked up my pace, driven by adrenaline. As I rounded a bend, I spotted Rachel standing at the edge of a steep ravine, her eyes wide with terror. I rushed to her side, my instincts screaming that something was horribly wrong. "Rachel, what's going on?" I shouted over the wind that howled like a wounded animal. She turned to me, her face pale, a mixture of disbelief and fear etched across her features. "It's Greg. He went looking for something in the ravine. I think he saw something." Her voice trembled, and I could see she was on the verge of panic. "Where is he?" I asked, glancing down into the abyss below, shadows cloaking the depths. "I don't know. He just disappeared," she cried, her hands shaking. Without thinking, I stepped closer to the edge, straining my eyes to see anything below. "Greg, can you hear me?" I called out, but only silence met my pleas. The wind whipped around us, and I felt an unsettling chill creep up my spine. "We need to find him," Rachel insisted, her resolve strengthening as fear gripped her. Together, we scrambled down the rocky incline, the ground crumbling beneath our feet. I focused on keeping my footing, but my mind raced with thoughts of Greg. He had been so obsessed with the legends, with unearthing the truths buried in the forest. What if he had gone too far this time? As we descended, I could feel the atmosphere shift. The air grew heavier, suffused with an eerie silence that felt unnatural. The closer we got to the ravine's base, the more I could sense an oppressive energy in the air, as if the forest itself was watching us, waiting. When we finally reached the bottom, my heart sank. The area was strewn with debris, and the shadows danced around us, concealing whatever lay ahead. "Greg," I shouted again, my voice echoing off the rock walls, but there was still no answer. "Over here." Rachel's voice broke through the haze of anxiety, and I followed her toward a cluster of trees that had fallen, their roots exposed. As we pushed through the underbrush, a horrifying sight met my eyes. Greg lay on the ground unconscious, a gash on his forehead bleeding profusely. Relief mixed with dread as I knelt beside him, checking for signs of life. He was breathing, but the shallow rise and fall of his chest did little to ease my worry. "Help me get him up," I said, grabbing him under the arms while Rachel took his legs. We struggled, dragging him away from the ravine, our hearts pounding in tandem with the thunder that rumbled overhead. Once we reached the safety of the trees, I began to assess the wound. "He needs a doctor," I said, panic creeping into my voice. "Can you carry him?" Rachel asked, her eyes darting between Greg and me. "I'll try," I grunted, and with great effort, I managed to hoist Greg onto my back. He was heavier than he looked, and I stumbled slightly, but I didn't have time to dwell on my weakness. The rain began to fall in heavy sheets, drenching us as we made our way back up the incline. The storm's fury mirrored the turmoil inside me. I was terrified for Greg, But I was also acutely aware of the stories we had unearthed together. Had his search for answers led him to the brink of something sinister? As we reached the top, a flash of lightning illuminated the forest, casting eerie shadows that danced across the trees. In that brief moment, I swore I saw figures lurking in the distance, silhouettes that seemed to fade into the darkness as quickly as they appeared. I shook my head, trying to dispel the hallucination. The exhaustion was getting to me, and I couldn't allow my mind to play tricks. Once we reached the ranger station, I dropped Greg onto a bench and fumbled for my radio. My fingers trembled as I attempted to call for help, but the storm interfered with our communication. Frustration surged within me, and panic set in as the weight of the moment crushed down. "Stay with him, Rachel. I need to find help," I said, bolting out of the station. The rain lashed against my skin as I made my way toward the access road, praying for anyone who could assist us. But as I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was alive, pulsating with energy, as if it were a living entity aware of my every move. I heard whispers on the wind, incoherent yet oddly familiar, calling out to me from the depths of the trees. "Jimmy," they seemed to say, luring me deeper into the darkness. I paused, taking a deep breath, wrestling with the urge to turn back. I was torn between the fear of what lay ahead and the desperation to save Greg. The forest had ensnared us in its grasp, and I knew that the truth I had sought would come at a terrible price. As I fought against the wind, pushing forward, I realized I had reached a turning point. The forest was no longer just a backdrop to my life as a ranger. It had become an entity intertwined with my fate, demanding that I confront its secrets. This moment would redefine everything I thought I knew, pushing me toward a reckoning that would change my life forever. I stood at the edge of the forest, the weight of the storm pressing down on my shoulders. The wind howled around me, the leaves rustling like whispers of old secrets. The panic I had felt just moments ago was now replaced by an unsettling clarity. As I took a deep breath, the rain fell in sheets, blurring the line between the familiar and the unknown. I realized that whatever happened next would change everything. When I returned to the ranger station, Rachel was still there, cradling Greg's head in her lap, her face a mask of fear and determination. "What took you so long?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He's not waking up, Jimmy." I know. I replied, my own anxiety bubbling to the surface. "I couldn't get through on the radio. I have to drive to the nearest hospital." I glanced at Greg, his skin pale against the dark wood of the bench. The sight churned my stomach. How could I let this happen? The thought of the forest closing in on me, its depths hiding truths I wasn't ready to face, filled me with dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that Greg's accident was no mere coincidence. The stories we had uncovered, the unsettling legends, all seemed to conspire against us. There was something in those woods, a presence that had taken Greg in an act of vengeance, and now it loomed over us like a dark cloud. "We need to hurry," I urged, shaking myself from the thoughts. I reached for the keys to the ranger truck, but Rachel's hand on my arm stopped me. "Jimmy, wait," she said, her voice softening. "What if this is more than just an accident? What if we're not supposed to leave? What if we're being punished for what we've disturbed?" Her eyes were wide, fear etched deep into her features. "Don't say that," I snapped, pulling away. "Greg needs help, and we're not going to let this place hold us captive. We can't let fear dictate our actions." I turned away, fighting the urge to give in to the growing anxiety within me. But as I made my way to the truck, I couldn't shake Rachel's words. The forest felt different now, more menacing, as if it were aware of our desperation. I climbed into the driver's seat, and Rachel settled in beside me, her fingers nervously fidgeting with the hem of her jacket. The engine roared to life, and we pulled out of the parking area, the tires crunching on gravel. I glanced in the rear-view mirror, half expecting to see the woods reaching out to us, but there was nothing, only the dark silhouette of trees against the stormy sky. The drive felt interminable. every moment stretched by the uncertainty of Greg's condition. I fought to focus on the road, but my mind was consumed with guilt. How had I let this happen? Had I been so wrapped up in my own insecurities that I had ignored the warnings? The forest seemed to echo my thoughts, each rustle of the branches a reminder of my failure. As we neared the highway, Rachel's phone buzzed with an incoming call, snapping me out of my reverie. She answered quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hello? Yes, we're on our way," her brow furrowed, and she exchanged a glance with me that sent a chill down my spine. "What is it?" I asked, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "It's the Park Service. They've heard about the storm, and they want to make sure we're okay. They're worried about strange occurrences in the park," she said hesitantly. "Strange occurrences?" I echoed, my heart racing. They mentioned missing hikers and some sightings. People saying they saw figures moving in the woods, but no one could find them. A wave of nausea washed over me. It felt like the forest was trying to reclaim its secrets, and we had unwittingly disturbed something ancient. I glanced at Rachel, her fear mirroring my own, and I knew we had to push through. We couldn't let the forest win. As we drove, the storm intensified, sheets of rain pelting the windshield and lightning illuminating the dark sky. I felt a surge of desperation. Would we even make it to the hospital? What if the forest had other plans for us? We finally reached the main road, and I turned the truck toward town, my heart pounding in rhythm with the rain. But the moment I reached the junction, the engine sputtered and died, leaving us stranded in the downpour. "Come on," I groaned, banging my fist against the steering wheel. "Not now. Not like this." Rachel looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. "What do we do?" "I'll check under the hood," I said, forcing myself out of the truck. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped into the rain, my clothes instantly soaked. I opened the hood, peering inside, but I didn't know much about engines. As I fiddled with a few wires, a flash of lightning illuminated the forest behind us, and I caught a glimpse of movement, something darting between the trees. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Jimmy," Rachel's voice broke through the storm, pulling me back to reality. "What's going on?" "I thought I saw something," I said, my voice trailing off. I shook my head, trying to dispel the fear creeping in. "It's just a storm playing tricks on me." I returned to the truck, drenched and trembling. "We need to get moving," I said, urgency in my voice. But as I settled back into the driver's seat, I realized my mind was racing with fear. What if Greg's injury was only the beginning? What if the forest was calling for more than just him? The weight of my own incompetence pressed down on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were caught in a web of consequences we hadn't fully grasped. As we sat in the darkness, the rain drumming on the roof, the reality of our situation set in. I knew the forest would not let us go without a fight. The stories were true. It was a place of reckoning, a living entity that would demand its due. And in that moment, I felt the first pangs of terror, knowing we had unwittingly awakened something we might not be able to escape. The storm raged around us, a cacophony of wind and rain that echoed the turmoil inside me. I knew we were in a precarious situation, stranded in the middle of nowhere with Greg unconscious, and the forest lurking just beyond the reach of our headlights. But in the depths of that chaos, a flicker of determination sparked within me. If I was going to protect Rachel and Greg, I had to confront the fear that had gripped me since we first set foot in the park. With a deep breath, I turned to Rachel, who sat beside me, her face pale and anxious. "We need to get Greg out of here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I can't let him down again. We can't just wait for help. We have to act." Rachel nodded, her resolve hardening as she pulled her wet hair back from her face. "You're right. Let's think this through. We need to assess our options. Can we flag someone down, or should we try to walk to the nearest road?" "I think walking is too dangerous, especially with the storm," I replied, my mind racing. but we could try to make it back to the ranger station. It's closer than the hospital. And maybe we can find some supplies to stabilize Greg until we can get help. As I formulated the plan, I could feel my heart rate begin to normalize. I realized that in taking action, I was regaining control, not just of the situation, but of myself. The fear that had threatened to consume me was now transformed into a force that pushed me to confront the chaos head-on. "Okay, let's do this," Rachel said, her voice strong, reflecting my newfound determination. We climbed out of the truck, the rain drenching us instantly, but there was no time to waste. I grabbed my flashlight, illuminating the path ahead as we made our way back toward the ranger station, the forest looming ominously on either side. As we trudged through the mud, I could feel the weight of the forest pressing down on us, every rustle in the underbrush amplifying my anxiety. But with every step, I forced myself to focus on Greg. I could visualize him waking up, his eyes fluttering open, and I knew I had to fight for that moment. Just keep moving, I muttered under my breath, a mantra against the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. Rachel stayed close, her presence a comforting anchor amidst the chaos. With each passing minute, I began to notice details in the forest I had never appreciated before. The way the trees bent under the weight of the rain, the delicate patterns of raindrops splattering on the leaves. It was as if I were seeing the forest for the first time. This place, which had once felt so menacing, now held an unexpected beauty, a vibrant pulse of life despite the storm. Suddenly, I stopped, my heart pounding in my chest as a familiar scent wafted through the air. It was the smell of damp earth, mixed with something else, something rotten. "Do you smell that?" I asked Rachel, my voice low. She nodded, her brow furrowed in concern. "Yeah, it's unsettling." As we continued walking, the scent grew stronger and with it, the unease. I turned my flashlight toward the ground, scanning for any signs of decay. And then I saw it. Scattered remnants of old campfires, charred wood half buried beneath the moss. I crouched down to investigate, my instincts telling me that these were not just old remnants. They felt connected to the stories we had heard, the unsettling accounts of people who had disappeared in the park. Rachel knelt beside me, her eyes wide as she examined the area. "What do you think happened here?" "I don't know, but it feels wrong," I replied, a shiver running down my spine. "It's like something dark has taken root in this place. We need to stay alert." Just as I stood up, a flicker of movement caught my eye, deeper within the trees. My heart raced, and I pointed my flashlight toward the shadow, ready to confront whatever lay hidden in the dark. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice echoing through the trees. Silence enveloped us, a heavy stillness that seemed to stretch on forever. Rachel held her breath beside me, her grip tightening on my arm. Just as I was about to turn away, a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman, her clothes tattered and drenched, her eyes wide with fear. "Help!" she cried, collapsing at our feet. "They're coming for me!" Instinct kicked in, and I rushed to her side. "What happened? Who's coming?" I asked, my heart racing. She gasped for breath, her voice trembling. "The spirits of the forest, they're angry. They want revenge for what we did." Her gaze darted around, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. A chill ran down my spine as her words resonated with everything we had uncovered. The legends we had dismissed as folklore were manifesting before us. "We need to get you to safety," I said firmly, but the woman grabbed my wrist, her grip like iron. "You don't understand. You have to leave this place. It's a trap." Panic bubbled up within me. "We can't leave Greg," I exclaimed, frustration boiling over. As if on cue, the trees began to groan, the wind picking up with an eerie howl. I felt a surge of fear, but in that moment, something shifted inside me. I was no longer the scared ranger who stumbled into the park seeking approval. I was determined to protect those I cared for. "Listen to me," I said, looking the woman in the eyes. We can't abandon anyone. We need to help each other. Her fear softened for a moment, and she nodded slowly. Then you need to face them. The spirits. They won't let you go until you confront the darkness you uncovered. I looked at Rachel, her face a mixture of concern and determination. We can't ignore this. We have to find a way to make it right, I said, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. With renewed resolve, I turned back to the woman. Lead us to where you encountered them. We'll confront whatever we have to, but we need to do it together. As she slowly rose to her feet, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I wasn't just fighting for Greg or Rachel. I was fighting for myself, for redemption. I had always felt like an outsider, unworthy of my position. But now, I was taking a stand. The fear that had once paralyzed me was transforming into a powerful force for growth. Together, we stepped into the unknown, my heart pounding with the thrill of facing our fears. This time, I wouldn't let the force consume me. I would confront the darkness, not just for Greg, but for myself. As the eerie forest closed in around us, a tension hung heavy in the air, thickening with every heartbeat. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, but the atmosphere felt charged, as if the very trees were alive, watching our every move. I glanced at Rachel and the woman, who had introduced herself as Clara, taking a moment to assess our situation. Clara's face was pale, etched with fear, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Where do we go from here? I asked, my voice steady but laced with urgency. We need to find the clearing, Clara replied, her gaze darting nervously toward the shadows. That's where I first felt their presence. If we're going to confront them, it has to be there. I nodded, a sense of purpose igniting within me. We had to face whatever malevolent force was lurking in this forest, but the weight of that realization settled heavily on my shoulders. My instincts screamed at me to run, to get back to the truck and seek safety, but I couldn't abandon Greg or Rachel. Not again. Let's gather our things, I said, scanning our surroundings for anything useful. My eyes landed on a few items, still lying in the mud near the truck. We'll need a flashlight, the first aid kit, and anything else that might help us. As I rummaged through our supplies, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The weight of the forest felt suffocating, like a predator stalking its prey, waiting for the right moment to strike. Clara gathered her breath, her hands shaking slightly as she clutched a small backpack filled with supplies. I could see she had been through something terrible, and it made me wonder what had happened in the clearing that had left her so traumatized. We need to prepare ourselves mentally, Rachel said, her voice breaking through my thoughts. If we're going to confront whatever's out there, we need to be united. No second-guessing each other. I nodded in agreement, feeling the need for solidarity among us. We'll face this together, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We have to keep each other grounded. Clara glanced between us, her expression softening. You don't understand the gravity of what you're facing. These spirits, they're not just angry, they're vengeful. They won't stop until they feel satisfied. What do you mean by satisfied? Rachel pressed, her brow furrowed with concern. They're bound to this place by pain and betrayal, Clara explained. You must acknowledge their suffering. You can't just confront them with anger. You have to listen and show them you understand. Only then can you find a way to appease them. As she spoke, I could feel my heart race. Could we truly communicate with something so otherworldly? But as I looked at Rachel and Clara, I knew we had no choice. We had to try. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath to steady myself. Let's think about what we know about this place. If these spirits are angry, they must have a reason for it. What have we done that could have disturbed them? Rachel nodded, her eyes narrowing in concentration. Maybe it's not just about us. The park is full of stories. Campers who leave trash behind, people who don't respect the land. We need to acknowledge that we're part of the problem. Clara's eyes brightened. Exactly. We need to show them that we care about their home. We can't change the past, but we can promise to do better moving forward. The idea felt heavy on my shoulders, but I could see the path forming ahead of us. What if we offer something to them? Something meaningful that shows our commitment. Rachel considered this for a moment. We could collect items that represent our respect for the forest, their home. Maybe something from each of us that symbolizes what we're willing to do to honor their memory. I felt a surge of hope. Let's find something that means something to us, and then we can head to the clearing. We'll confront whatever spirits await us, and we'll show them we're not their enemies. We gathered our supplies, carefully selecting items that resonated with us. I chose a small, intricately carved wooden figurine I had found years ago while hiking, and homage to the forest I had grown to love despite its dangers. Rachel picked a handful of wildflowers, vibrant against the dreary backdrop, a symbol of life amidst darkness. Clara, however, hesitated, her eyes distant as if she were lost in her memories. "What's wrong?" I asked, sensing her reluctance. "I don't have anything," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the rain. "I left everything behind when I fled. I was so terrified. I didn't think I would ever come back here." I felt a pang of empathy for her. You don't have to have a physical object. It could be a promise, a commitment to honor the spirits. Just saying it out loud can be powerful. She looked at me, and I could see the flicker of resolve returning to her eyes. "You're right," she said, her voice firming up. "I promise to respect this forest and honor the memories of those lost. I won't let fear control me again." As the three of us stood together in that moment, I felt a bond forming, a shared understanding of our purpose. We weren't just fighting for ourselves anymore. We were fighting for the spirits trapped in this forest, for the ones who had lost their lives due to neglect and anger. With our preparations complete, we set off toward the clearing, a sense of unity propelling us forward. The rain had eased, but the oppressive atmosphere remained, thick with tension. I could feel the forest's eyes on us, an unseen presence waiting to see what we would do. As we walked, I took a moment to reflect on how far I had come since stepping into this park. I had entered as a man seeking validation, but now I was stepping forward as a protector, ready to confront the darkness, not only for Greg and Rachel, but for every soul that had been touched by this place. Arriving at the clearing, the world around us seemed to shift. The trees parted, revealing a moonlit expanse that felt surreal amidst the chaos of the storm. The atmosphere changed as if we had crossed a threshold into another realm. I could feel the weight of history pressing in on us, the energy pulsing like a heartbeat. "We're here," I whispered, awe and trepidation washing over me. As we stood together, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill my lungs. "Whatever happens next, we face it together," I said, my voice steady and firm. Rachel and Clara nodded, their faces determined. We had prepared as best as we could, and now it was time to confront whatever awaited us. As I opened my eyes, I could see a shadow stirring in the trees, a figure, dark and formless, stepping into the light of the clearing. The climax was upon us, and I was ready to face it, no longer a scared ranger, but a defender of the forest's lost souls. The clearing lay bathed in silvery moonlight, the air electric with anticipation. As the shadow emerged from the trees, I felt an involuntary shiver run down my spine. It was a figure, a silhouette both human and ethereal, the outline shifting as if it were made of mist. The haunting presence bore down on us, a chilling embodiment of the forest's sorrow. "Stay together," I whispered, my voice barely rising above the rustle of leaves. Rachel and Clara stood firm at my sides, their hands clasped tightly, each of us bracing against the encroaching darkness. The figure hovered before us, its features obscured, but the sorrow it carried palpable. I could almost hear the whispers of the forest, the cries of the lost mingling with the wind. This was the moment we had prepared for, the confrontation that could either bring redemption or doom. "Who dares to enter my domain?" a voice echoed, not from lips but from the very essence of the forest itself. It reverberated around us, sending chills through my bones. You tread on sacred ground, where pain and betrayal intertwine. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. We come in peace, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We want to understand your pain and honor the memories of those lost. The figure shifted, the sorrow deepening in its presence. Understanding? What do you know of suffering? You who walk freely under the sun while we linger in darkness. I could feel the weight of its grief, an oppressive sadness that seeped into my skin. We don't claim to know your pain, I replied, my voice stronger now. But we want to help. We want to promise to respect this forest and honor its spirits. We're sorry for what has been lost. The figure remained silent, and I could feel the tension in the air thicken, like a storm ready to break. It was Clara who broke the silence, stepping forward with a trembling but resolute voice. I, too, have felt the weight of this forest. I ran away from my fears, but now I realize that I cannot hide. I promise to speak for those who have no voice, to honor the spirits trapped here. The figure turned slightly toward her, the darkness swirling like smoke. And what do you offer that could mend the wounds of the past? I could see the glimmer of hope in Clara's eyes as she reached into her backpack and pulled out the wildflowers she had gathered. These are symbols of life, of growth, she said, kneeling and laying them gently on the ground. They represent a promise to care for this forest and all who dwell within it. We will not forget you. As the flowers touched the earth, a soft glow emanated from them, illuminating the clearing with an otherworldly light. I felt a shift in the atmosphere. The tension eased slightly as if the forest itself was absorbing her promise. Rachel followed Clara's lead, stepping forward with a handful of soil. I promise to plant new life in this forest, she said, her voice trembling but fierce. To nurture and protect this land, to ensure that it thrives for generations to come. As she scattered the soil at Clara's feet, the figure seemed to soften, its edges blurring as if it were considering her words. But I knew we needed to offer more. We needed to confront our own shortcomings, to show that we were not merely bystanders but willing participants in the healing process. I took a deep breath, summoning my courage. And I promise, I said, my voice resonating with determination, to respect this land as a guardian, to learn from its lessons and teach others to do the same. We will share your stories, the stories of those who have suffered here. We will not let your memories fade. The figure paused, the air around us vibrating with a heavy silence. The darkness seemed to ripple, and I felt an uneasy sense of anticipation. Would our words be enough? Suddenly, a gust of wind surged through the clearing, stirring the leaves and sending shivers through my body. The figure shifted, becoming more defined, its features coalescing into a visage marked by sorrow and anger. You speak of promises, yet many have come before you, with empty words and fleeting resolve. Why should I believe you? The accusation hung in the air, sharp as a blade. I could feel my heart racing, the weight of my own insecurities pressing down. I had often felt inadequate in my role as a ranger, doubting whether I was capable of making a real difference. But in this moment, I could not falter. Because we're not just words, I implored, stepping closer. We're actions. We will fight for your memories, ensure that the beauty of this forest is preserved. We will share the truth about what happened here and make sure it never happens again. The figure wavered, uncertainty flickering across its features. You would confront the darkness that lies within this forest, the pain that festers. I nodded, fueled by a sense of purpose. We'll confront it together. We'll shine a light on the truth, and we'll bring those responsible to justice. The forest deserves that, and so do you. The figure stared at me, and for a moment, I could see flickers of recognition in its eyes, an understanding of our intent. The glow from Clara's flowers brightened, filling the clearing with warmth, and the wind began to calm. Very well, it said, its voice softer now, filled with a haunting melancholy. If you truly mean what you say, then face the darkness that binds me. Only through confronting it will you find the path to healing. The ground beneath us trembled as the shadows began to coalesce, swirling around us, forming tendrils of darkness that crept closer. I felt the air grow cold, a palpable sense of dread washing over us. We were not just facing spirits, but the collective pain of all who had suffered here. As the darkness gathered, I glanced at Rachel and Clara, their faces reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. We were in this together, and as the shadows encroached, I knew we had to stand firm. This was our moment, our chance to break the cycle of pain and bring peace to the spirits trapped in this haunting forest. "Are you ready?" I asked, my heart racing, my voice steady. "Yes," they replied in unison, a testament to our unity. With that, we braced ourselves, standing together against the dark tide, ready to confront the terrors that awaited us. The shadows loomed large, swirling around us with a menacing energy that seemed almost alive. The darkness pulsed, alive with the echoes of sorrow and anger that resonated through the forest. We stood united, a fragile barrier against the tide of despair. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and I felt a profound weight settle on my shoulders, not just for myself, but for the countless souls trapped in this haunting landscape. As the darkness advanced, I took a step forward, the resolve in my heart amplifying with each heartbeat. "We will face you," I shouted, my voice breaking through the chilling air, infused with determination. "We are here to honor the past and to bring light where there is none." The shadows seemed to recoil momentarily, and I seized the opportunity to step closer to the swirling mass. Clara and Rachel remained at my side, their hands tightly clasped, offering their strength and support. Together, we represented hope, a glimmer of light in the overwhelming darkness that sought to engulf us. "I can feel your pain," Clara said, her voice steady and clear. "We acknowledge what has happened here. The sorrow, the betrayal, it ends with us. We will not let it fester any longer." As if summoned by her words, the shadows paused, swirling restlessly, as if uncertain how to respond to our defiance. The air thickened with tension, and I sensed a struggle within the darkness, a fight between the urge to lash out and the desire to be heard, to be acknowledged. "Remember," I implored, drawing on every ounce of courage, "you are not alone. Your stories deserve to be told. Let us bear witness to your pain. Let us bring your truth into the light." At that moment, a brilliant burst of energy radiated from Clara's flowers, illuminating the clearing with a warm, golden light. The glow pushed back against the shadows, illuminating the faces of those trapped within. I could see them clearly now, specters twisted in agony, bound by chains of their own sorrow. Each face told a story, a testament to the injustice they had endured. "Join us," Rachel called out, her voice imbued with warmth. "We are here to remember you, to fight for your memories and ensure that your stories are not forgotten." The shadows hesitated, flickering in response to our words. I could feel the collective energy of the spirits shifting, their despair mingling with a glimmer of hope. The darkness around us seemed to waver, and I realized that our unity had sparked something powerful. With a deep breath, I raised my hands, palms open toward the darkness. "We offer you our compassion, our understanding, and our commitment to fight for your legacy. We will not rest until your truth is known." The shadows writhed as if caught in a tempest, but slowly they began to recede. The air shifted, the atmosphere lightening as the spirits of the forest stepped forward. I could see them clearer now, shadows of the past intertwining with the warm glow of our promise. As the last vestiges of darkness faded, a profound silence enveloped us. The clearing, once shrouded in fear, was now bathed in light. The forest breathed again, a gentle rustling of leaves whispering gratitude and release. In that moment, I knew that our actions had meaning. We had stood against the darkness and emerged victorious. not just for ourselves, but for the lost souls who had suffered for far too long. As we walked away from the clearing, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The park would no longer be a place of torment. It would be a sanctuary, a living tribute to the stories of those who had been forgotten. United by our shared experience, Clara, Rachel, and I made a pact. We would advocate for this land, for its preservation, and the honoring of those lost within its depths. Together, we would ensure that the park remained a place of healing, not just for the spirits of the past, but for all who sought refuge in its embrace. As we left the haunted grounds behind us, I realized that I had transformed. The fear that once clouded my heart had been replaced with a sense of purpose. I was no longer just a guardian of the forest. I was its voice, a champion of its memories. And I would ensure that the echoes of the past would never be silenced again. Years passed, and the forest of the Smoky Mountains became a sanctuary of remembrance. Clara, Rachel, and I dedicated our lives to preserving its beauty and honoring the spirits that lingered within. Sharing the stories of those lost to the shadows. Each tale we told added light to the forest, dispelling the darkness that once haunted it. I often returned to the clearing, feeling the warmth of the spirits surrounding me, grateful for our pact. The park thrived, a testament to resilience, forever reminding us that even the darkest past can yield hope and healing. If you found this story compelling, I invite you to explore your own local legends and the hidden histories of your surroundings. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's discuss the stories that shaped your communities. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling tales that delve into the mysteries of our world. If you dare, click on the next video to uncover even darker secrets lurking in the shadows. Together, we can shine a light on the unknown and ensure that every voice is heard. Your journey into the unknown begins now.